The doorbell rang with a suddenness that pulled me from my thoughts and the hum of the television. My focus shattered. Curiosity spiked. I wondered who it could be at this hour. I got up slowly, stepping toward the door, peering through the peephole with a mixture of weariness and resignation. It couldn't be her, could it? Alice, after all this time, after everything that had happened? How could she have tracked me down? I thought about turning around, returning to the dull flicker of the TV, ignoring the doorbell. It seemed so much easier than confronting the ghosts of my past. But I knew better. If she'd gone to the trouble to find me, she wasn't going to leave without whatever it was she came for. Sighing heavily, I hooked the safety chain and opened the door just wide enough for us to see each other. "What the hell do you want?" I asked, my voice colder than I intended. "I came to talk to you," she replied, her voice thick with an unfamiliar mix of hesitation and resolve. I paused, confused. Didn't the way I left make it clear that I had no interest in seeing you again, let alone talking to you? Alice looked at me, the silence stretching for a moment. "I don't know why you left. I came home and you were gone. No note, no explanation, just gone." I was momentarily taken aback. She had no idea why I left. How could she not know? It felt like the world had collapsed beneath me that night, and now she stood there oblivious to it all. "You can't be serious," I muttered, my voice tinged with disbelief. "How could you not know? I warned you. I told you exactly what would happen if you went through with it." "May I come in?" Alice asked, her eyes pleading for some form of understanding I wasn't ready to give. Against my better judgment, I undid the chain and stepped aside to let her in. She walked past me, moving into the living room and sitting down on the couch, her posture stiff but determined. "Could I get a glass of water?" she asked, a faint tremor in her voice. I nodded, walking toward the kitchen, my mind instantly returning to the night it all started. It had begun so innocuously. I had just come home from work, expecting the same routine evening we'd shared for years. Instead, I found Alice standing in the living room, dressed to the nines, looking nothing like the woman I'd married. "I didn't know we had plans to go out," I said, my confusion evident. "We don't," Alice replied, her voice light, almost detached. "I have a date tonight." I froze. "A date with who?" I asked. "You don't know him," she answered before I could ask further. "A man you work with, yeah. His name is Tom. He started recently, and he's asked me to go to Sylvia's birthday party with him. He didn't want to go alone." "You still here? Disbelieving. He knows you're married, right?" I asked. "It doesn't matter," Alice said quickly, her eyes flickering away from mine. "Nothing is going to happen between us. I just don't want to go to Sylvia's party alone, and you won't go with me, so I told him I'd go with him." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. "You understand why I refuse to go, right?" "I can't stand being around that woman," I said. "Alice, you know what she's like." Alice's expression hardened. "You're being ridiculous, Sam. She's been my best friend since we were kids. I'm not going to turn my back on her just because you don't like her." I struggled to contain my anger. "I don't like her because she's been divorced 4 times, and every time it's been because she got caught cheating. And I hate going to her parties because of all the drugs she is floating around. That's not a place for you, Alice. You're better than that." Her lips curled into a dismissive smile. "So you think just because she's cheated, I'm going to cheat too? Is that it?" The words hit me like a slap in the face. "Now that you mention it," I said, my pulse quickening, "I think it's highly likely. You're dressed in a provocative little black dress, preparing to go out with another man. You're dressing like that for him, not for me. And I can only think of one reason why you would want to look like that for him." Her face flushed with indignation. "That's a horrible thing to say, Sam." "No, it's not. What did you wear to the last 2 parties at Sylvia's?" "Slacks and a blouse, jeans and a sweater. But now suddenly you're dressed like that for Tom." I took a step toward her, my frustration boiling over. "It's obvious, Alice. You're doing exactly what Sylvia's been encouraging you to do for years. Join in. I guess she's finally gotten what she wanted." Alice's voice wavered, but she didn't back down. "You're wrong. It's not like that at all," I said, shaking my head, fighting to remain calm. "Easy enough to prove me wrong. Don't go. Stay here with me." "I can't. Tom's counting on me, and he's more important to you than I am." She didn't answer right away, and in that silence, I knew what her response was going to be. "This won't hurt us, Sam," she said finally, walking toward the door. "Don't wait up for me." "Goodbye, Alice," I said, the finality of my words making her hesitate just for a moment. And then she was gone. The silence in the house felt oppressive as I sat down on the couch. Had I overreacted? Maybe, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. I had spent years trying to convince Alice to stop spending time with Sylvia, trying to get her to break free from the toxic influence of that woman. But every time, she refused. She wasn't willing to listen to me. I spent most of the evening contemplating what I should do next. Should I confront Alice? Should I demand she stay home, confess whatever feelings were stirring beneath the surface? Or should I just let her go, knowing full well that this was a line she was crossing, a line I might never be able to uncross? By the time I finally decided to go to bed, I was consumed by doubts. The ringing of the bedside phone woke me up a few hours later. It was 1 a.m. Who the hell would be calling me at this hour? I groggily picked up the receiver. "Hello? Hello? Did I wake you up?" The voice was unmistakable, Sylvia. I muttered, my annoyance growing. "I just thought I'd let you know," Sylvia said, her voice dripping with malicious glee. "Your wife has finally found herself a real man." "What the hell are you talking about?" I snapped. "Just what I said," Sylvia replied, her voice louder now, almost smug. "Alice has found herself a real man. A man who can give her what she really needs." Here, just listen," she taunted. Reluctantly, I listened, my heart sinking as the sounds of intimacy filled the airwaves. And then, unmistakably, I heard Alice's voice, my wife's voice, moaning with pleasure, her words clear and unmistakable. "Oh God, yes. Take me, please take me." I slammed the phone down, my hand shaking as the full weight of her betrayal hit me like a freight train. Sylvia had orchestrated this, and Alice had walked right into it. 30 seconds later, the phone rang again. I knew who it was. I picked up the receiver, but this time I didn't speak. I let the phone fall to the floor, the harsh ringing echoing in the empty apartment. The devastation was too much to bear. By the time I gathered myself, I was already packing. I grabbed my things, my clothes, my tools, everything I needed, and left the apartment by sunrise. It wasn't just the affair that stung. It was Alice's utter disregard for everything we had built together. The complete disrespect she had shown was too much. I was done. I went to the bank and cleaned out our accounts, then quit my job without explanation. I drove to a motel and left my old life behind. The phone kept ringing, her calls unanswered, but I didn't care anymore. I was gone. The next day, I was on the road, heading somewhere, anywhere, far from the wreckage of my marriage. After a few days, I settled in Castle Rock, Colorado, found a new job, and began to rebuild my life step by step. But even with all the distance between me and Alice, even with a new life starting, I couldn't shake the feeling that the story wasn't over yet. Deep down, I knew it wasn't. 2 years had passed since I'd left Alice. 2 years of quiet, mundane days in Castle Rock. I'd rebuilt my life in small but meaningful ways, with new friends, new routines, and a new sense of independence that I hadn't realized I'd been missing until it was gone. I had dated casually, had a brief fling here and there, and even found a comfortable, no-strings-attached friend with benefits in a woman named Beverly, who seemed to understand that life was too short for drama. In the end, though, nothing seemed to matter. My life was quieter, more peaceful, and certainly less complicated. It was the kind of life I had needed after Alice, after Sylvia, after everything that had happened. But I never could completely escape the nagging feeling that the end of my marriage hadn't been the end of my story with Alice. I knew she'd find a way to get in touch with me eventually. After all, she always had a way of showing up at the most inconvenient times. That morning, as I sipped coffee and scrolled through work emails, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "I know you've been avoiding me, Sam. I had to track you down, but I'm here now. Please, can we talk?" I stared at the message for a moment, trying to make sense of it. Alice? How had she found me? A chill ran down my spine. I knew exactly what this was. She had spent the last 2 years trying to find a way to make things right, to get back into my life. And now, she thought that after everything that had happened, She could just walk in and pick up where we left off. I ignored the message, the anger rising like a tide within me. But deep down, there was a part of me that knew I couldn't avoid this forever. I had to face her. I had to close this chapter of my life for good, even if it meant confronting the truth of my own bitterness and rage. The knock on my door came later that afternoon. The sound was unmistakable. She was here. I opened the door slowly, and there she stood, Alice, a little older, her face lined with the wear of time, but still undeniably beautiful, still undeniably hers. I couldn't decide if I was angry, disgusted, or just numb, but I felt the weight of everything between us crash down on me as she stepped into the doorway. "I know you heard me when I told you what would happen if you went on that date," I said coldly, my words deliberately cutting. "You ignored me, walked out that door, and now here you are. How did you find me?" "Private detective," she answered simply, her voice tight. I couldn't just let it go, Sam. I needed to find you. "Why?" I asked, unable to hide the bitterness in my tone. "Why bother?" "Because I love you," she replied, her eyes searching mine for some sign of recognition, some sign that I would still care. "I made a mistake, Sam. I know I did, but I was drugged that night, and I was coerced into something I didn't want. I didn't even flinch. The lie, the excuse, it was all the same. I don't want to hear it, Alice. It's too late for that. You walked out on me that night, and you broke everything we had. You can't just walk back in here like nothing happened." She flinched, the words cutting deeper than I intended. But I didn't care. I was done with her, done with the lies, done with the broken promises, and done with the years of watching her ignore the warning signs and keep running back to that toxic friend, Sylvia. "You didn't even give me a chance to explain," Alice protested. "I told you everything, Sam. I swear I didn't cheat on you willingly. You have to believe me." The anger flared up inside me like a wildfire. "You didn't cheat on me willingly, really? You were there, Alice. You put yourself in that position. You let Sylvia drag you into her mess, and you ignored every word I said. You walked out that door, dressed provocatively for another man, and you knew exactly what you were doing." She opened her mouth to respond, but I cut her off. "I warned you, Alice. I told you that night if you walked out, you were kissing this marriage goodbye. You didn't listen, and now here we are. You wasted your time and money tracking me down, but it's over. I don't want you anymore." Alice's eyes filled with tears. "Sam, please. You don't understand. I never wanted to hurt you. You were always the one I loved. You have to believe me." I stepped back, the weight of her words like an anchor dragging me under. But then the anger surged again, stronger than before. "No, Alice. I don't need to hear you beg for forgiveness. You don't get to walk back into my life after everything you've done. You've crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. You've hurt me, and you've hurt yourself in the process. And now, all I feel is nothing." She trembled as she stood there, the silence between us more damning than any words could have been. "You should have listened when I said this was the end," I said quietly. My voice was hard. "You had your chance, now leave." Alice didn't move. Her face was pale, and I could see the depth of her hurt and confusion. "Sam, please don't make me leave," she said. "I've made so many mistakes, but I swear I never stopped loving you." I stared at her, my heart numb. She had no idea what she was asking. She didn't understand what it felt like to be betrayed, to have someone you loved walk out on you, to have your trust shattered so completely. The Alice I once knew was gone, replaced by someone who thought she could waltz back in and fix everything with words. She didn't deserve my forgiveness, and she wasn't going to get it. I turned away, heading toward the bedroom to get changed for dinner. When I came back, I was already dressed, my mind made up. I wasn't going to let Alice think she could destroy my life and then just walk back and like nothing had happened. Just then, the front door opened again. A tall, beautiful woman walked in, her platinum blonde hair cascading over her shoulders, a confident smile on her face. She stepped inside with the grace of someone who belonged. "Hey babe, I'm home," she called out, completely unaware of the tension in the room. Alice's eyes widened, her gaze flickering between us as the new woman, Beverly, looked at her with an easy smile. "Who's this?" Beverly asked, her voice warm but curious. "This is Alice," I said flatly, turning to Alice with a smirk. You've heard me mention her a time or two. Alice stood frozen, her face ashen. Beverly, ever the picture of composure, stepped over to Alice and, to my complete surprise, gave her a tight hug. Thank you for sending Sam to me, she said sweetly, turning to me afterward. So, what's for dinner? Alice stood there, her eyes wide with shock. I could see the realization dawning on her. She had just been replaced. She had no more hold over me, and the pain she had caused me was nothing compared to what she was feeling now. I thought we'd go out, I said casually, turning to Beverly. I made reservations at Angelo's. I'll go change, Beverly replied, disappearing into the bedroom. Alice's voice broke through the silence. Does she know you're still married? She does, I replied without a second thought. We've been together for a while now. Alice's face twisted with a mix of anger and disbelief. You've moved on that quickly? Just like that. Just like that. I answered, the finality in my words hanging in the air. You left me. You made your choice. Now I've made mine. You need to get a divorce, Alice, move on. Find someone else, but don't think for 1 second you can come back into my life. Tears welled in her eyes, but there was nothing left in me to offer. Nothing but the bitter taste of betrayal and the satisfaction of knowing she couldn't hurt me anymore. I'm not going anywhere, Sam. I'm going to fight for you, Alice said, her voice cracking as she took a step toward me. Realistically, Alice, I replied, my voice cool. For you to fight for me, you'd have to be here, but you're not. You're gone. You walked out on me, and now you've lost me for good. Her face crumpled as she finally understood the gravity of what I was saying. Goodbye, Alice, I said softly, walking past her. Don't come back. As I left her standing there, I closed the door behind me, stepping into the life I had built, one that Alice could no longer touch. I walked into the living room, finding Beverly waiting for me with a smile. I could feel the weight of the past lifting off my shoulders piece by piece. It was over, finally completely over. Ready to go? Beverly asked, her voice warm and full of life. I smiled and nodded. Yeah, let's go. We left the house together, and as we drove to the restaurant, I couldn't help but feel that I had finally done what I needed to do. Alice was gone for good, and so was the past. It was time to move forward, and this time, I wasn't looking back.